Trump and outgoing Prime Minister Theresa May will begin on Tuesday, where they are expected to discuss climate change and Chinese technology firm Huawei. However, anti-Trump protests have been planned in several cities, including in London, Manchester, Belfast, and Birmingham. Our correspondent in London, Pablo Navarrete, has more.
US President Donald Trump arrived in the UK at around 9 a.m. local time to begin a three-day state visit to the UK. Now, even before he's really landed, he was already mired in controversy after the London mayor of the Labour Party, Sadiq Khan, in an article yesterday, accused Trump's rhetoric of resembling that of a 20th century fascist. Now, Trump responded just before arriving from the plane, tweeting insults to Sadiq Khan, and in addition, yesterday, the US ambassador to the UK on a BBC morning show suggested that as part of a possible trade deal between the UK and the US, that all parts of the British economy should be open to that free trade, including that of the National Health Service, which caused, again, another element of controversy. So Trump begins today. He has had tea with the Queen, or he's been in Buckingham Palace. Tomorrow he's expected to have a meeting with business leaders with Theresa May, the UK Prime Minister, officially till the 7th of June, and then she will carry on as interim until her successor is found or chosen amongst the Conservative Party. So Trump will meet with her and with the Foreign Minister Jeremy Hunt, who is a candidate to take over from Trump. Now, Trump has already declared that he sees the former Foreign Minister Boris Johnson as a good successor to Theresa May, which has drawn criticism from various quarters, including from Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, who has accused Trump of intervening in British politics. Now, at the state dinner tonight, Jeremy Corbyn, along with the House of Parliament Speaker John Bercow and the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Vince Cable, have boycotted that dinner, and there is a very heavy police presence in the city. Tomorrow also there will be a large protest. Hundreds of thousands are expected in the streets to protest Trump's visit, with trade unionists and a wide variety of social movements from ethnic minority, migrant groups, Muslim groups, protesting Trump's visit. So Trump has arrived in the UK for a three-day visit. Already controversy is abound, and we will see what happens in the next few days.
We thank Pablo Navarrete for that report. And the main protest against Trump's visit is expected to take place in London on Tuesday. But on the first day of the visit, a small group of protesters mingled with the crowds outside Downing Street and Buckingham Palace. There was a heavy police presence and metal barriers in place to contain crowds expected to descend on the area when the U.S. leader arrives.
That with Puerto Rico, the way he didn't really send very much aid out to them after they had the terrible hurricane. He just disdains humanity, it appears, from the surface, you know. And unless you're a blonde, busty woman, he doesn't seem as if he's very interested in anybody else.
Oh my God, no. He's the worst thing that ever happened to our country. He's destroying our country, and he's a terrible representative for our country, for the rest of the world. He only thinks of himself. He doesn't read. He's not educated. He tried to get out of military service, so he doesn't really understand what the military is going through. He doesn't get advice from the people who really know what they're talking about in government. It's just the worst thing that ever happened to our country.
Moving on, the Mexican foreign minister is set to start talks with representatives of the U.S. government over their migration dispute. These meetings come after the U.S. threatened to slap punitive tariffs on its southern neighbor if it didn't do something to stop the flow of Central American migrants fleeing their homes.
Mexico is willing to continue working, as I already mentioned, with the United States to address issues of common concern. Our people are united by the deep friendship and history, and we wish our governments to remain friends. We have faith in dialogue and politics as means to avoid costly and unnecessary confrontations. We believe that our countries can reach a deal and how to face a matter in which our approaches are different.
La imposición de aranceles.
Slapping tariffs, along with a decision to cancel aid programs to Northern Central American countries, could have a counterproductive effect and will not reduce the flow of migration. Tariffs could cause financial and economic instability, which means that Mexico could reduce its capacity to address migration flows and to offer alternatives to new migrants who have recently arrived in Mexico.
Our correspondent in Washington, D.C., Elena Duarte, has the details.
On Monday morning in the U.S. Capitol, Mexico's Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard held a press conference to provide updates on his trip to the U.S., a visit which seeks to establish negotiations between Mexico and the U.S. government after President Donald Trump announced a 5% tariff on all Mexican imports starting on June 10th if the Latin American country does not control immigration. Mexican officials have revealed that should these tariffs take effect, many jobs would be lost. Ebrard reaffirmed his stance in favor of dialogue, saying he will have meetings with the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, the representative for Agriculture, and the representative for Trade, Robert Lighthizer. According to Jesus Seade, Vice Minister for North America at Mexico's Foreign Ministry, these 5% tariffs could cost Mexico U.S. $350 billion per year. But if you recall, Trump had said that these tariffs would gradually increase and could reach 25%. Officials from the Latin American country have, however, insisted that immigration should be treated side by side with the U.S. Meanwhile, via his Twitter account, Trump has said that he's not in favor of dialogue. Instead, he's calling for actions, not words.
That was Elena Duarte from Washington, D.C. Doctors and teachers are holding more demonstrations, protests in Honduras, even after the government revoked 2 emergency decrees at the heart of the protests. After days of popular pressure in the streets on Sunday night, President Juan Orlando Hernandez withdrew 2 decrees which the protesters say will privatize healthcare and education. But he announced 2 new decrees. The protesters said they were not consulted about the new legislation and that therefore their action would continue. They also condemned the use of police violence against their demonstrations and demanded an impartial investigation. Late on Sunday, President Hernandez addressed the nation in order to announce the repeal of 2 of the most controversial policies his government had proposed and to call an end to the indefinite strikes from doctors and teachers.
Following talks with the Commissioner for Human Rights, we have agreed on the need for emergency decrees in both the education and healthcare sectors. This includes establishing of a dialogue table in order to improve public education, which must be free and easily accessible, as per our Constitution. Another dialogue table must be set up for the healthcare sector, in order to improve our systems and to guarantee it remains free. We want all sectors of society to take part in these talks, to improve our systems with transparency and accountability, so that these rights are guaranteed for all our people.
Our correspondent in Tegucigalpa, Gilda Silvestrucci, has more.
Teachers and healthcare workers say they do not trust the words of President Juan Orlando Hernandez, despite his repeal of 2 highly controversial emergency decrees. This as the president called for talks with leaders who were not approved by the unions. Union leaders say they will continue their strike and mobilizations until all decrees they oppose are cancelled and a real dialogue table is set to discuss their demands. The group says the president only cancelled some decrees while implementing others, angering protesters further. There are also reports of additional repression in remote areas of the country where people have once again come out to set up roadblocks but are being met by heavily armed security forces.
Teachers in Chile have started an indefinite national strike in response to the government's failure to fulfill demands made by teachers' unions. Union leaders say their demands are just and are part of their fight for labor and social justice. The union-led strike is due to the refusal of the government of Sebastián Piñera to increase wages and to implement changes needed in their primary school curriculum.
This strike has come about because of the intransigence and arrogance of the government. We were talking to them for months. But in our final meeting, the ministry and the government went back on everything they had said. They arrived with a letter that didn't address any of the issues, and that has really annoyed the teachers.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
A quest in the nature to find their roots.
Nosotros somos parte de un mismo mundo.
While diesel will rise from 3.08 per liter to 3.14. Meanwhile, kerosene and diesel will increase by 2 and 6 cents respectively. Similarly, the prices of liquefied petroleum gas have increased as well. Barbadian Prime Minister Mia Amor Motley has announced a $1.5 billion boost for Bridgetown, saying the project would take precedence now that the economy has been stabilized. Motley rolled out a parcel of initiatives, including a multi-million-dollar hotel expansion project and the provision of 3,000 housing units.
For the public servants in this country, those earning, in particular, $4,000 a month and under. And let's be real, a policeman that earning $2,700 a month or $3,000 a month, he can't afford or she can't afford to go and buy a piece of land at $25 a square foot to build a house. They can't do it.
Antigua's Prime Minister has signed an initiative that would encourage Caribbean countries to take steps to end plastic pollution in the region. The St. John's Declaration was signed on Saturday as the island hosted the Played Out Festival. The free concert saw the coming together of regional and international artists with policymakers to raise awareness about plastic pollution. During the concert, Prime Minister Gaston Brown thanked the country for their support in the bid to end plastic pollution.
My government acted expeditiously to protect our citizens and our environment. We responded in the strongest possible way by passing legislation that bans the utilization of single-use plastics and styrofoams. Tonight, I thank the citizens and residents of Antigua and Barbuda for your responsiveness, your participation, and commitment to eliminate single-use plastics from our environment.
Social movements in Paraguay have been marching on the National Day Against Child Abuse. They demanded more action from the state as the number of cases of abuse keeps increasing.
Paraguay's National Day Against Child Abuse pays homage to Felicita, a girl who sold mandarins on the street and who was sexually abused and murdered 15 years ago.
It all started 15 years ago when Felicita was on her way home from school and she was abused and killed. Her body was found on the outskirts of Yaguarón. She used to sell fruit on the street.
These social movements are demanding an end to impunity in cases of sexual abuse and exploitation of children. Between January and April of this year, 985 cases were reported, according to official figures.
This case remains unpunished, as do many others where the government has done nothing. The justice system is complicit because it hasn't done anything against the perpetrators.
Organized teenagers are asking the Ministry of Education to implement a comprehensive program of sex education to provide the information and tools that would allow them to protect themselves from such abuse.
Currently, we get about 8 cases reported daily. That is a very frightening number. That's why we're marching today, because we believe that the Paraguayan state hasn't done enough to prevent this.
The different organizations agree that the government hasn't done enough to deal with the alarming figures. They say that prevention is the key to avoiding any kind of abuse.
We want the schools to give us the tools to use against the sexual abuse and exploitation of children, so we can know how to defend ourselves, and so that the policies that already exist can really work.
In 2018 alone, official data shows that 614 girls between the ages of 10 and 14 were forced to give birth as a result of sexual abuse. A cruel reality that raises grave questions about the Paraguayan society.
For the fifth consecutive year, women in Argentina have taken to the streets under the motto "Not One Less" in rejection of femicides and violence against women. Our correspondent, Sabrina Roth, has the details.
In Argentina, the Not One Less feminist movement has flooded the streets. They're demanding an end to economic, sexist, racist and classist violence against all women. This includes those who identify as lesbian, bisexual, transsexual and non-binary. Since the movement was founded on June 3, 2015, there have been roughly 1,193 femicides in the country. Every 32 years, a person is murdered, and that's just because of their gender. In this year's march, one of the main requests is the enforcement of a law called Micaela, which demands that government workers be trained. This, as many reports of violence against women have been neglected, which proves why the law is so important. Of all the reports of femicides across the country, only 11% of the accused have gotten restraining orders, while 17.5% have previously been indicted for similar crimes. Meanwhile, out of 1,193 femicides, 31 were against trans women. This is one more reason for Monday's demonstrations. It also marks 1 week since the abortion bill has been brought up for debate in the Argentinian Congress, a bill which seeks to allow legal, free and safe abortions in the country.
We thank Sabrina Roth for that report. The third edition of the Lula Libre Festival took place this weekend in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Over 30 musicians performed for the thousands in attendance who came together to call for the immediate release of former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, who's serving a 12-year prison term on alleged corruption charges.
Not even a heavy downpour could stop or slow down loyal Lula supporters. They came out in their numbers for the Lula Libre Festival, raising their voices to demand that former President Lula da Silva is set free. Festival goers all agree that Lula is a political prisoner.
Important for people to remain on the streets, for democracy and in defense of Lula, who is innocent. We will continue taking the streets until he is freed.
Lula's imprisonment is tantamount to abusing the rights of workers, of women and Afro-Brazilians. As such, Lula's freedom represents the freedom of a large part of Brazil's population.
Over 30 artists performed at the festival, while also expressing their support for the millions who demand Lula's freedom.
During the times we live in, I think Lula's imprisonment was a major step in allowing the incompetent far-right to rise. Before being a musician, I have my rights as a citizen, so I am serving my duty in defense of those rights.
To this day, Lula still represents hope for anyone who had lost faith. From his rise in the 1970s to today as a political prisoner, he's remained a symbol of hope and resistance.
Come nightfall, people continue to sing along. People of all ages and from all backgrounds promise that they will continue their fight until Lula is finally released from prison.
If I hadn't come out today, I would have greatly regretted it. I'm happy to be here now, living this historic moment.
June 2nd will remain a historic day, as people took to the streets once again to demand freedom of former President Lula da Silva. These people say democracy in Brazil came to an end after the coup against former President Dilma Rousseff, and it will only be restored with Lula free.
We'll take a short break now, don't go away.
Enjoy the best content in spaces where you will discover new perspectives. Innovation.
Several others were left wounded. Following a night of protest, demonstrators burned tires and put up barricades in Khartoum. For their part, the Transitional Military Council has denied using force. These protesters have been demanding that a civilian government take over running the country after the ousting of President Omar al-Bashir.
The Professionals Association has announced civil disobedience on social media. Civil disobedience means that the country is on pause. The country has stopped. All civilians must protect themselves. It is the peaceful people against the guns. As I speak to you, guns are firing at us, but we are unarmed.
And still in Sudan, all operations and flights at Khartoum airport have been suspended after unrest erupted in the capital. The protests follow the collapse of talks between the military council and opposition groups on the establishment of an interim government. The Mauritanian Constitutional Court has cleared 6 aspirants as candidates for the country's upcoming presidential elections. Mauritania will go to the polls to elect a new president on June 22nd, and campaigns are expected to kick off early this month. If there is no outright winner in the first round of elections, a runoff vote will be held on July 6th. According to a presidential decree, President Mohamed Ould Abdel Aziz is to step down after 2 terms in office.
There is an essential point for me. It's reorganization and modernization of our armed and security forces with the Republicans in order for our country to face the dangers that assail it.
The Kenyan government has issued new banknotes in an effort to combat money laundering and counterfeits. Government authorities believe this change is a matter of national security, as it could safeguard financial systems from being abused. Only the 1,000 shilling note will be replaced with a new design that has reportedly met with all lawful requirements.
The design of the notes has satisfied every applicable law. It has satisfied public participation. We got a lot of ideas. For instance, as I have said before, one of the ideas from the public was to make the notes more accessible to visually impaired persons.
Zambian President Edgar Lungu has continued his morning jogs as a way of encouraging citizens to live a healthy lifestyle. Lungu, who has been jogging every day for 2 years now, says it helps him reduce stress. Hundreds of joggers usually join the president for his morning runs. A helicopter crew searching for 8 climbers who went missing in the Indian Himalayas has reportedly spotted 5 bodies. Authorities say they are trying to assess how to retrieve the bodies from the uneven terrain where helicopters cannot land. 4 Britons, 2 U.S. citizens, an Australian and an Indian make up the missing group. The climbers have not been heard from since the 26th of May, a day before an avalanche hit the mountain. Pakistan has stunned tournament favorites England by beating them by 14 runs in today's Cricket World Cup match at the Trent Bridge. Pakistan trounced the hosts with 348 runs for 8 wickets, with England trailing with 334 runs for 9 wickets. And Pakistan opened with a spin and saw Shadab Khan trap Jason Roy LWV. When Ben Stokes edged Shoaib Malik, behind it meant Jos Buttler arrived with 118 for 4, with 235 required from just under 28 overs. And despite Joe Root's 107, the first century of the tournament, and a 75-ball ton from Buttler, England were registered to 334 for 9 to lose by 14 runs. Pakistan will play Sri Lanka in Bristol on Friday. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.
From here to beyond the South. From here to the Caribbean or further north. Where can I see news connecting the whole South? From Washington. From Mexico.